learning Sefer Yetzira, the third perek, the first Mishnah. And we've had a chapter, the first perek, the first chapter spoke about the spheres themselves. The 10 spheres are the 10 intelligences that animate the Absolute. This animation comes forth and it seems completely invisible, it seems completely automatic, and yet we know that these intelligences are alive because they will respond in real time to everything that's taking place. And so it is a formula, but it's a very intelligent formula. It's a design that gives us access. But the design that gives us access is very intelligent. We're always interacting with it, and it's always reacting to our interactions. It's never asleep. As frustrated as we might be with its reactions, as much as it might seem to us like they're unjust or unfair, even that just goes into the formula and the reaction still comes. They don't take it personal, but they have their way of responding to that. It's all part of their design. It's all part of the way that life was configured to be in order for us to be able to be completely immersed in the physical experience. There was a desire for the potential for us to completely forget ourselves. And this required all these levels of intelligence, all these levels of lenses through which we are going to perceive ourselves in order to make this distortion possible. The body allows for something that is incomprehensible in spiritual terms. In spiritual terms, the one who knows is the one that's known, and the power that he uses to know himself is him, the force called knowing. He is the knower, he is knowing, and through knowing, he knows himself, so he is the one that's known, which means there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to hide. How can anything else be? And yet, he is so intelligent that he came up with a solution for that. Vessel and light. And through the power of vessel and light, he can conceal himself in the way that he is still the knower. He is still the known. He is still the power of knowing. And yet when we will ask him, who are you? He won't know. And so this is through these intelligences that reveal and conceal his identity based on so many levels of criteria that we cannot pronounce it in words. This is why it says by the Torah, it's Arucha me'eretz mida, it's longer than the earth. Irechava min hayam, it's wider than the sea. It's wider than the ocean. Because the wisdom has no end. The wisdom of what? The wisdom of the human interacting with these intelligences. To know how to do that in a way that feeds them. What does it mean, feeds them? Can they have food? They can have more presence and revelation. That's their food. That's what they want from us. If I reveal intelligence, I am strengthening my relationship with intelligence. Everything that comes forth from that, all the consequences we might imagine, and many consequences we can't imagine, are being received because I'm strengthening my relationship with intelligence. Intelligence is a force. She likes it when we express her. If I express kindness, I'm creating a relationship with kindness. I'm feeding kindness. Kindness needs food? No, kindness wants presence on this planet. Kindness wants to be revealed. I help reveal her. She knows about me. I have a closer relationship to kindness. Kindness is an attribute of the designer. The designer wants his attributes to be revealed. I revealed his attribute. I now receive more of that attribute. I gave sustenance. Therefore, I grew in the capacity of having a relationship with that revelation. And so the 10 spheres is in the first chapter. These are the lights. This is what's being revealed. What's being revealed is 10 different intelligences. And then there are the vessels, 22 letters, 22 vessels, that are the tools to allow for that revelation. And so intelligence wants to reveal itself. But how is it going to do that? First, in everything that's created, there's intelligence. This is not a uniform creation. It's not, we have one being and therefore we're going to have cells. Each cell is going to represent the one being and there's just going to be trillions of them everywhere. That's not what happened. It didn't stop there. That's what happened partially. That place that's still existing now and is the reason why we're here is first there are cells that are identical to each other. That's the first place where the intelligence is giving sustenance. But these forms of sustenance are going to vary depending on the recipient, depending on what is going on within creation and how it's being divided right now. Where are the attributes being revealed? Where are the attributes being frustrated? Where is intelligence being revealed? Where is intelligence being frustrated? Where is justice being revealed? Where is justice being frustrated? And so there is a place where there just cells. There was a desire, a will for cells, and therefore there are cells called Aver Kadmon, the ancient air. The ancient air meaning not the air that we're breathing, but what was there before the air that we're breathing. Closer to what we would call today ether. The Hiyuli, the potential, but not even that. Before it was potential. And so with that, everything is written. Every cell in my body has all these potentials of what it can become, but who gave it those potentials? There is something that can be every cell and every potential. And then as it goes and it becomes and it formulates, it reduces its potentials until it takes on a form. And then when it's in form state, it still has potentials of what it's going to become or what it can become, what it can't become based on the interactions. These are all designed by the wisdom. These are all a demonstration of the wisdom. And so there is that place, the Aver Kadmon, where everything is still the same. Aver She'eino Nitfas, the air that cannot be grasped, the spirit that cannot be revealed within the human intelligence. And then it comes forth and it receives exactly its sustenance according to the situation at hand, according to human instruction. And so the potentials within my body are being manifested according to my instructions. Most of them I'm not aware of. If I was aware of all those instructions, I would take the opportunity to make myself more comfortable. Most of these instructions I'm not aware of, and yet they're my instructions. Maybe they were given to me 20, 30 years ago, and I'm still executing those instructions, and yet they are my instructions that now I'm giving, consciously and unconsciously, in order for the life force to translate into what it is. And so the air that cannot be grasped becomes not only air, but also fire and also water and also earth. Also plants and also trees that give fruit and duplicate themselves. They come from the air that cannot be grasped. Also animals, and their emotions and their reactions and their impulses, they come from the air that cannot be grasped. Also humans. And all the noise and the chaos that they bring with them, it comes from the noise that cannot be grasped, because there is no noise. There is no movement. There is no change. That's what really exists. This temporarily exists, but there's something that really exists that dresses up as the something that temporarily exists. And there's a formula of how he does that and why he does it specifically in this way. And he, in the design, anticipates for us to cooperate with that in order to bring him forth, in order to allow him to manifest as the being that he desired to be. He needs our cooperation to do that, because we are the form. He needs the cooperation within the form to execute the plan that was before the form. That's the reason for the form. And so here he says, Perek Gimel Mishnah Aleph, Sholosh Imois, Emesh, 3 mothers, the Aleph, the Mem, and the Shin. This is after we spoke about the 10 spheres, we spoke about the 22 letters. Now we're going to speak about a subgroup within the 22 letters. This is the 3 mothers. Yesoidon, their foundation, is Kav Choife v'Kav Schuz v'Loshen Chok Machriya B'Intayim. The potential for guilt and the potential for innocence. Innocence aligns us with the source. Guilt separates us from the source. The source, which is the intelligence, all the attributes, everything that is interacting with man, all the 10 spheres, what's the first thing this intelligence is going to ask before it starts deciding how to interact with you? The first kalim, the first vessels where you're going to receive the life force are going to be, is he innocent or is he guilty? Is he on my side or is he against me? Just like with a person, if I'm to interact with an external person, what's going to be the first thing that's going to result in how I'm going to interact with, which attribute I'm going to wear? Is this my friend or is this my enemy? This is before everything else. If it's my friend, I put on a certain personality and then there are certain consequences. If it's my enemy, I put on a certain personality and there are a whole different set of consequences. They might say the same thing, but the consequences are going to be entirely different. And so the first place the intelligence is going to decide which attributes to use are going to be Kav Schus v'Kav Choiva. Innocence or guilt. And what's going to decide? Language is going to decide. What were you told? What do you believe about yourself? What do you think? This is what's going to decide. If you're wrong, you still suffer the consequences. You're only going to find out you're wrong after you leave your body, if you get access to the truth. As long as you're in your body, what you believe is what decides. If you are manipulating yourself to believe, your soul knows that takes energy. You're using your soul's resources to manipulate. And then there are consequences for that. But it's all, that calculation is happening right where you're sitting. There's no other place until you leave. When you leave, you know what was conscious, what was unconscious, what was a manipulation, what was real. Your soul knows. Your soul, whenever we go to sleep, the soul goes back to its natural state, and the body tries to recover, and everything tries to come to where the soul wants to be. And so the soul, within her essence, knows her truth. That's where she receives life from. The body can lie to itself with the energy of the soul. And yet, there is a truth about what do we believe. This is why, in the ancient world, when people were still somewhat sane, they would go to war over beliefs. Today people say, what difference does it make what he believes? We can get along, it's just fine. They don't understand the consequences of having beliefs that tilt you to the side of guilt. Beliefs that tilt humanity to the side of guilt are worse than physical suffering, worse than financial difficulties. They last much longer. Financial difficulties, they are difficult here, but spiritually, there is some type of payment that's being made towards the side of guilt. Whatever things we really are guilty of, something is being worn off. But when it's the belief that's wrong and tilting us to the side of guilt, it's like the soul is being kidnapped, hijacked, removed from its natural state. And then this can take multiple incarnations in order to cleanse. Because that belief doesn't allow the soul to return to its nature even after it leaves the body. It's so intimidated by the truth, it's been hiding from the truth so deeply that it doesn't want to discover what it is. It rather wants to come down here and bury itself in the lie again. And so it will come back to a place, to a home, that has similar beliefs to the one that it left the world with. It can't leave the atmosphere of this planet because it's too afraid of facing the truth that it got into conflict with. And so these souls keep on returning. This is much worse than even going to war. People would willingly go to war, endanger their life, endanger their family, in order to protect their beliefs. These were the sane people. The insane people would figure out ways of forgetting the truth in order to try to enjoy the opportunities that they had to make their body feel good. They didn't understand the importance of the beliefs. And so those people would have lives where they've already given up on their relationship with the intelligences. They already weren't investing any effort to stay on the side of innocence. They were trying to enjoy the joys and the pleasures that can be had only by the guilty. But those who were sane, those who were still invested in their souls, those who still remembered something in them was still alive, they would be willing to give their lives in order not to violate their beliefs. They wouldn't want to live in an environment that might weaken their beliefs, or might, God forbid, eventually cause them to forget, even if only by a tiny percentage. Even if only it would mean that they wouldn't feel it in every organ of their body. Because this is where the intelligences decide their relationship with us. Or rather, because the intelligences are completely involved in our betterment, we might say, this is the place where we decide our relationship with these intelligences. But they are the ones who react accordingly. We are the ones who attract whatever food it is that they're going to feed us. And we attract it based on the food that we feed them, based on what's being manifested through us, based on what's coming in through our organs. And so the tongue, the language, the culture is going to decide which side of the equation the human mind finds itself. And as a result, the human heart has to put up with. The deeper it is in the side of guilt, the more hell for one who wakes up from this illusion. The deeper it is on the side of guilt, the less likely that someone will wake up. The emotional cost of waking up will be so heavy, the burden will be so deep, that the human organs cannot pay such a burden. They would avoid by all costs to understand their truth, because they wouldn't want to realize how deeply they are on the side of guilt, to have to fight their way out of there. This is why for 2,000 years we haven't had any prophecy. No one has been innocent since the Christian beliefs covered this planet. There hasn't been an innocent soul. There won't be an innocent soul based on those beliefs. There cannot be an innocent soul based on those beliefs. The belief itself is that the soul is corrupt. And so this is why he's called the angel of death. The angel of death, meaning he tilted the world to the side of guilt. We're waiting for one that's called Menachem Meshiv Nafshi, the consoler who can return my soul. How is he going to console me after all this madness? He's going to explain to me that it's not my fault. He's going to explain to me how to get out of this mindset so that it doesn't continue happening. That's how he's going to console me. And then when we know that it can never happen again, then we will have context for what happened. As long as we don't know it will never happen again, then we cannot create a context that will justify it. We are not out of it, we are still in it. The mind that's in it cannot understand the context that's bigger than it. And so this consolation will come when we will understand what happened to humanity, when we will understand how did we get here in the first place. What tilted us so far into the side of guilt until all of humanity has given up on their spiritual rights, has given up on their inheritance, has given up on the power invested in them by the Absolute. And they've turned into beggars. The basic food of their organs, which is given plentiful by the planet, has turned into a struggle. How are we going to provide? The land is plentiful. The animals are plentiful. The space for us is plentiful. And we are struggling to survive. Why are we struggling to survive? Because we are all guilty in our own minds. We don't understand what we deserve. We don't understand how it was meant to be. We take answers that only a guilty person would accept because he doesn't understand his real nature. He doesn't understand what should have been. He doesn't understand what to compare it to. And this is based on speech. This is based on our expression, our interpretation. There's no one else involved other than what we choose to make it. We were given the power of speech. This is who we are. But when our speech receives the wrong food, when our speech receives the wrong sustenance, and it turns against humanity, it turns against the Creator, it turns against everything that's holy and important, then we fall into the side of guilt. Then our speech turns even more against, thinking that we are somehow on some other side, thinking that an other side can even exist, making up an other side with our speech, another side that never existed and never will exist. And then we lose our loyalty. We lose our loyalty. We lose our rights. Our soul knows. This is why there haven't been prophets. There hasn't been anyone that could be loyal to the truth. The truth has been so bitter. Nobody has managed to see beyond the pain. Nobody has managed to repair their relationship with reality in order to remember. And so the speech is the only thing that can save us. This is why we have the Torah. This is why we have speech at the root of our worship. Kihem chayenu v'orech yameinu. They are our life. When we will figure out the right speech, we will leave exile, servitude, bondage, slavery, whatever name we might have for it. But if we can't figure out speech, we can't have life. Life and death, which comes back to innocence and guilt, are in the hands of the tongue. In which way will the tongue express the equation? This is what will result in the conclusion of the mind. In the parish he says, אמש, א' ממשין שיסוד כף זכוז וכף חובר ולשון חוק מחיר בינתיים, והם כלול ספרים, והם שלוש ספרים שנפתוחים בראש השונה. There's 3 different svarim that get opened in Rosh Hashanah. So where do they get opened? In the heart. As one thinks about himself, he is judging himself. If we say now there's going to be a judgment in the heavens, what happens to the person? He starts judging himself. That's the natural consequence. Am I going to pass? Am I not going to pass? Who will tell you if you're going to pass or not going to pass? Your mind, the one that's judging you. Is this judgment in accordance with some absolute principle? No, but it's judging. The closer it is to the absolute principle, the more the judgment will be accurate. The more the judgment is accurate, the more you're manifesting based on your real nature. But the judgment will happen nevertheless. If one doesn't become wise, he's still judging. He's just not judging wisely. The consequences will be his. And so on Rosh Hashanah, the day of judgment, 3 different books are being opened. Sifran Shel Tzadikim, the book of the innocent. Sifran Shel Rishon, the book of the guilty. Sifran Shel Beinanim, the book of those whose speech can still move to either side of the aisle. And so now for 10 days we're going to speak in order to move, to shift that soul into the aisle of the guilty. From the aisle of the guilty into the aisle of the innocent. And so the Beinani, until Yom Kippur, from Rosh Hashanah, the day of judgment, it opened, the book got opened. Till Yom Kippur, the day of forgiveness, he is speaking in order to move, in order to shift from the book of the guilty into the book of the innocent. So these are the 3 Sfarim. Echad Shel Tzadikim Gemur, one is from the innocent. They are completely innocent. V'em b'kav zchus. V'echad Shel Rishoim, one of the guilty, that are already completely guilty. V'em b'kav choiva. V'echad Shel Beinanim v'em b'lashon chok machriya b'netayim. One is for those in the middle who the language can still shift. V'tzorichat eladas, you need to know, כי צורת הנשמה מחוברת מאויסיס הקודש בסדרי המצוות אלו יעשו את האדם וחי בהם ממש. The organs, the parts that together create life, these are the letters of the soul. And so he's receiving life exactly according to his interaction with the organs. Everything that he's doing, the organs are listening, and the organs are reacting according to the intelligence of his soul. And so when he does the mitzvahs, what are the mitzvahs? The 248 commandments, positive commandments, which represent the 248 body parts. Meaning, if he knows the secret behind a mitzvah, he knows how to feed a body part. If he knows how to feed a body part, then that body part is receiving life from the soul. This is why the Torah says, Adam, you do these mitzvahs, you do these commandments, and through them you get life. Each organ gets its life according to the commandment. The first commandment that all commandments are hanging on, without the first commandment there would be no other commandments. The first commandment is not set in the way of a commandment. It's said in the way of a declaration. Anochi Hashem Elohecha, I am the divine being that is giving you power. I am it. I am the thing itself. You shall not believe that there is any other. You shall not imagine that you get power from any other. I am the one that gives you power. Yes, I have my formula of how I give you power, but I am giving you power. Don't you get confused as you're trying to please my formula and forget that I am the one that's giving you power. Don't bow to any other gods. Who are gods? The ones who give you power. Don't bow to anything that gives you power, other than the one inside you that's giving you power. Learn how to please him. Don't you assume that you know him. But don't please anyone else. If you go to someone else, it's because you want to understand how to please him. You want to feed some of his body parts. You want to do something that he requires. But it's not that someone else that you're worshiping. If you worship that someone else, you've lost access to life. And so this principle, Anochi Hashem Elohecha, this represents the heart itself. That's the organ that's represented by this mitzvah. And therefore it's not sent in the way of a commandment. The heart has no commandments. It's said as a declaration. You are the owner of a heart. Because you are the owner of a heart, you better be careful with it. You better be careful with it means another 612 commandments. This is how to be careful with the heart. This is what it needs. Some of them are obvious. Some of them are very allegorical and distant from our way of thinking. But all of them are telling us something about the nature of the human heart and the need of the organs that were created as the chariot for the one who dwells in the human heart. And so therefore he says, if he does it, he will live with them. If he doesn't do it, how shall he live? If the heart doesn't believe in its purpose, in its importance, if the heart doesn't feel welcome in existence, then it's missing heart. That being is missing heart. That representation of the divine is no longer a representation of the divine. It's a representation of the demonic. Who is the demonic? It's bits and pieces of divine that don't have the intelligence to know their place. It's a broken divine. That's the demonic. It's something that was meant to be divine but never quite made it to its destination. Why? It's missing heart. Why is it missing heart? There's not enough Anochi Hashem Elohecha in that heart. He doesn't understand his place. Why is there not Anochi Hashem Elohecha in that heart? The 612 commandments were broken. Something wasn't getting what it was supposed to, and the heart wasn't getting what it's supposed to, and therefore the heart is not what it's supposed to. So v'chai behem mamash, you live with these commandments. Ki yislavu eleim ha'chaim v'asholem, because through this, through the food, that the sustenance that they're getting, the life and the peace will be added to his soul, al nishmasa bel yoinim. The soul, which is dwelling in the higher dimensions, will receive more light, life and peace in those dimensions. From there will come forth to the physical representation of that man, Chaim v'chesed, life and kindness. Each organ of the organs of the soul will become stronger with the power of the divine spirit that lives, which is called Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, comes when all the organs are in the holy state of full function. Because anyone who was a balmum, anyone that was missing a function of any organ or limb, wouldn't be able to do the worship, do the priestly duties. Kol asher bo mum lo yikrav. Whoever has something missing within the organism, he cannot get close to the divine. And so when everything is right, this is a representation of the divine, then comes the Holy Spirit. If a person violates, then the letters get confused. Then there is a declaration of guilt. Their sins were carried on their bones. The bones are the ones who get frustrated when a person is anticipating something that is very not pleasant. And so we can suppress the emotional reaction of the guilt. But the deeper reaction, which is in the bones, cannot be suppressed. There's an expression there of that guilt. There's an anticipation there that one day there will be a reckoning. And now the fear of that reckoning is going to weaken the bones. The stability of that organism is being threatened. He goes into a state of guilt. He doesn't have access to the attributes of the divine, which are kindness and compassion and life. If this happens with one of the organs that the soul needs, like the heart, let's say if in someone his heart realizes that he has no place together with the source, then that person can no longer live. When reality violates the heart to such a degree, a person like that has a heart attack. This is the definition of a heart attack, is that the heart realized the truth that it cannot live with. Now, because of the condition of the world, because of the demonic activity on our planet, not every heart attack means that the person that had the heart attack was in conflict with the source. Sometimes the person that had the heart attack was in conflict with the demonic because he had the compassion of the source. Nevertheless, there is a conflict there between the reality that's being perceived and the reality of the heart and the soul and what it's willing to contain. And so this happens because there's a realization, a revelation of the soul that is in conflict with the reality it has to put up with. And so it is for all the other organs, if they are organs that give life. If they go into this completely the side of guilt, then the soul leaves. If it's a organ that the soul is not dependent on it, and so the same goes for other organs, but there it's just going to reflect disease. And so this is the answer to the relationship between the behaviors of people and the functions of their bodies and disease, where from a Western perspective there seems to be no direct relationship. But from the ancient world they are telling us that there is a direct relationship, and at the root of all disease is some type of a disconnection from life. At the root of all disconnection from life is something that feels guilty or out of place or not united with the life force itself. Something got offended. It might be a result of the demonic. It usually is. But the demonic caused something to happen that created a conflict between the source and the one dwelling in that body. This is at the root of all disease. Because this is at the root of how the attributes are going to interact with the organs. And obviously how the attributes are going to interact with the organs are going to result in the consequences. And sometimes we can see this in obvious ways, that when the one dwelling within the body feels a certain level of guilt, he's going to start becoming very loose with his body. He's going to take tremendous risks with his body that make no sense. It's not rational. But according to his level of guilt, it makes perfect sense. He's so certain that he doesn't deserve good that his body feels like a burden to him. He's almost like, let me just get that punishment and get it over with. And so this is at the root of the distribution of life. This is at the root of why humanity is so messed up, is because the way that we teach religion, the way that we teach life, nobody is going to be innocent. It doesn't match human nature. Human nature will not allow you to behave on those terms. And so before you were born, we can already tell you with absolute certainty that you're going to be extremely guilty. You're going to feel like you violated all the rules, even though there was never a possibility for you to live by those rules. The Christian mentality allows for such type of thinking. It normalizes a concept that's appalling to anybody that has a human heart. But that sensitivity gets turned off very early in life. It seems normal, it seems acceptable. Everybody seems to know it and be okay with it. Oh, they're not okay. There's no one home. The demonic has taken over. The human attributes would puke out such a belief immediately. The human attributes are in crisis when they discover that this is the nature of what's taking place. These are all the different crises that children and teenagers and adults and older adults go through in their life. The crisis is not something new. The crisis is a realization of something that happens to everyone, which means it's an artificial crisis. We are creating the crisis. The crisis is the realization, oh, we're being really ignorant about life. We're really not giving it the right attention. We're really not doing it in a way that will please the intelligence that designed it. Of course, at the end, we're going to find out that we weren't guilty. But the question is, what are we going to go through until we're going to find that out, until we're going to know that? At what point in our process? Will it still be when we're in the body, or will it be after we leave the body, or will it be after we have reincarnated a few times? Of course, when we're going to return to the source, we're going to discover that everything was accurate. We just didn't understand it. We didn't know how to align with it. We didn't know how to surrender or what to surrender to. But as long as these beliefs are acceptable in the world, as long as these beliefs are normal, then we are crazy. This is why the world has lost soul. This is why there's no wisdom, there's no intelligence. No one wants to look for the wisdom. They're afraid of what they're going to discover when they're going to become wise. They're afraid of facing the fact that we are all guilty. But we're not guilty by will. We are guilty because we've been indoctrinated into guilt. Before we were even guilty, we already believed we're guilty with all our hearts. We couldn't even have been guilty. We weren't even at the age where you're allowed to be guilty. And our faith was already sealed. And so we're waiting for someone to come and console our souls, someone to come and explain to us the nature of this entanglement. Explain to us the path that's going to allow us to come back to innocence. This is the speech that we're waiting for. These are the words. These are the divine words that are going to free us. It's not like the doctors explain. Disease doesn't come the way the doctors explain. Because you will find other people do the same thing the doctor says you shouldn't do, and they don't have that disease. The doctors try to explain it from the bottom up, that it's the conditions of the body that are causing the soul to suffer. But the wise say no, it's the conditions of the soul that are causing the body to suffer. It's the name that dwells within us, not nature. It's the will that animates us, not nature. Nature creates our body. On our body rides a divine will. That divine will is where the instructions come from, what our body will do. Our body is capable of many potentials that we haven't seen because we haven't learned how to get along with the divine will. The divine will dwells in us. Nature is simply providing a chariot for the divine will to express itself. The name dwells upon them. If we reject the name, the name leaves and the bitterness of death remains. The name is what gives life. Those who cling to it live in whichever dimension they find themselves. And those who separate themselves from the name, those who think that they're going to be in conflict with the source and they're going to win, those who think that they've outthunk him somehow, are going to discover that they've been focused on the wrong things. They haven't been paying attention. They've been on the side of guilt. They thought that they can out-argue the absolute. And then from where comes sustenance? Then from there comes a process of restoration, which needs to peel off all these beliefs from the soul. It needs to cleanse the spirit from all the conflict that it generated within it. And then the name returns. The second Mishnah, Sholosh Amos Emesh, Sholosh Amos Emesh, the three mothers, Aleph Mem Shin, Soid Godel Mufla Mechusa. A great secret that is wondrous and hidden. V'chosem b'sheish tabos, it's sealed with 6 rings. Imimenu yotzem esh v'mayim ischalkem zocher nekeva. The 3 turn to 6. The 3 letters that create 3 dimensions turn to 6 directions. The 6 directions are the combinations of the 3 letters. And so in all 6 dimensions, in all 6 directions, there's going to be all 3 letters. The difference is going to be in the order. And so if we have 3 elements, we have fire, water that came out of air, then we can have 6 different directions. In 2 of the directions, the air will be the most prominent. In one of them, the fire will be second, and the water third. In one of them, the water will be second, and the fire third. These are two directions of one dimension, the dimension of air. In the dimension of fire, we're going to have one side, the fire is first, then the air, then the water. The other side, the fire is first, then the water, then the air. So now we have 4 directions, 2 dimensions. And the last dimension of water, one side the water is first, and then the fire, then the air. The other side the water is first, then the air, then the fire. Now we have 6 dimensions. These are the 6 dimensions that were the beginning of the 6 directions that we are interacting with when we are in space. The directions of space, east and west, north and south, up and down, are correlating to the spiritual dimensions that came forth from the source as these 3 elements interacted with each other and gave 6 different variations. And so this is what he says about the 6 rings that come out of the 6 directions. And these directions, in each side, there's a male and a female. The male and the female means there is a form that comes forth, and there's a vessel that receives that form. And then we can interchange the vessels and the forms. So the fire can be in the vessel of water. The water can be in the vessel of air. And like this, we have more and more combinations. These combinations are going to be visible in our body. So for example, if we look at the brain is a vessel of water. But the activity of the nerves is fire. And so the form, the light within the brain is fire, and the vessel that holds that light is water. In the heart, we're going to have heat, we're going to have blood, which is fire and water in the vessel. But the light that's received in the heart is the air, the spirit that animates the heart. And so there we have air as the light and fire and water as the vessel. And so too, all the organs are different combinations of these forces. The heat, which is the fire, the air and the animation, the spirit, and the water, the liquids and the desire. Water in the body represents desire. This is evident in the exchanges of desire, whether when we eat, where the mouth prepares the moisture in order to receive the food, and the same thing when there is an interaction between a male and a female. There's the different types of moisture that come forth to demonstrate desire. And so it is in every organ. The water represents desire, represents life, represents the side of innocence, and the fire represents the rules, the container, the active force that gives constant continuance through constant change. And so there, through the force of fire, come all types of restriction. In the human being, the desires are represented by the water. This is where the human being wants to receive life, to feed his organs. And the speech created by the nerves, which represent the fire, are going to create all the rules and all the restrictions of how this transaction is going to take place. Sholosh Emesh, Sholosh Imos is the 3 mothers. Yesoidan, these are the foundations. Imehen noldu oves, from there came forth the fathers. The fathers are the actual elements that we interact with. So here we're talking about the letters. The letters are the mothers that are still before the elements. The elements that we know are simply representations. They're metaphors to these forces beyond time and space. The soul is already colored by these forces. The fieriness of the soul, the wateriness of the soul, the desires of the soul, the expressions of the soul. And so on the level of soul, these forces are visible way before the physical. The physical came forth from these original revelations. Shemehem nivra kol. And from the revelations, everything was created. From the different revelations on all the dimensions of fire, air, and water, all the combinations of life were made. So it says in the parish, Shalosh Amos Emesh, Shalosh Amos is 3 mothers. Soid Godel Mifla Mechus, it's a big secret that is wondrous and hidden. Parish Kshenov Elach Kerech Netzel Shnei Afechem K'me'esh Yimayim Mikoach Poshut. If we will try to investigate, how does it happen that 2 opposite forces like fire and water came forth from the same power? The Aver Kadmon, the air that's not visible or graspable, how did from that air come forth 2 opposites, fire and water? We won't be able to understand it. So our ability to comprehend will get tired before we can access this secret. Therefore, that's why he calls it a secret. He says there's a secret here in these 3 elements. What's the secret? It's the type of secret that can never be revealed. We don't have the tools to know the answer to the secret. That's why it's called wondrous. Wondrous means something that is beyond our ability to grasp. If it can be grasped, it's no longer wondrous. So it says Godol means Migdula. The Midas HaChesed is called Godol. It's a big secret. Why is it big? Because even the entire attribute of Chesed, the entire attribute of kindness, doesn't have an answer to it. It's bigger than the attribute of kindness itself, the depth of the secret. Mufla, it's wondrous, mitzad gvura. It's bigger than the power for anyone to search or to find out. Even the bina, even the level of understanding, which is receiving the instructions. She's called the mother of the children. The children are the opposites. The bina, the mother, which brings forth the attributes, the left side and the right side, she herself doesn't know how do these come forth from the one that is completely united. So afilu mibina how could it be that I'm receiving the will of one who is absolute, and yet he's giving me opposites to manifest? He's giving me opposite attributes to manifest his one united desire. The Bina cannot understand why, but this is the instruction she receives from above. It's signed with 6 rings. These are the 6 directions. That are signed with 6 names. Yud Hey Vav, Yud Vav Hey. And so the Yud represents fire, the Yud represents water, the Hey represents fire, and the Vav represents air. And so now we're going to have 6 combinations. Yud Hey Vav is the first combination, and Yud Vav Hey is the opposite combination. And so here we have the water, the fire, the air is 1, and then the water, the air, the fire is 2. These are 2 directions of the same dimension. Then Hey Yud Vav, Hey Vav Yud. Here the fire is first, and you have 2 different combinations, 2 directions of the same dimension. Then Vav Yud Hey, Vav Hey Yud, the air is first. You have 2 combinations that form a dimension. כמו שפרש בפרק א', ושש הווייס אלה הן מכל השישה דורים של א' מ' שין, א' שין מ'. So now he says, because the name has these combinations, these permutations, the same happens with the elements. The elements that represent the name are coming forth, and they have the combinations of the name. Just like in the name you had Yud Hey Vav and Yud Vav Hey, so the same way you're going to have the combinations in the Aleph Mem Shin, Aleph Shin Mem, Mem Shin Aleph, Mem Aleph Shin, Shin Aleph Mem, Shin Mem Aleph. All of these are combinations that come forth from the name. V'nikru tabos, ki betabas hamelech nechtam. Why is they called rings? Because it's the ring of the king that signs off. It's the ring of the king that is the signature that causes things to come out into manifestation. So nechtam v'nigber v'niskase v'nelem v'masherot z'lalimoy. He decided to make it so, and he decided to hide how he made it from us, so that we can't go beyond the seal. The seal of the king is the place until where we can come and see the greatness of his wisdom and the greatness of his kingdom. But beyond the seal we cannot go. He sealed it, meaning we cannot see what is behind it, his reasoning for why he made it so. והנה יוד מן יד אבוב כנגד א' מ' מ' שין ושש לאבר. Here it says the yud is for the air. He puts the air by the chachma. This has to do with how we split up the elements when we spoke about the spheres. So usually the elements go right, left, and center. Is yud on the right side, hey on the left side, vav in the middle. But because he gave us the ruach in the beginning as chachma, as wisdom, and so therefore now he gives the yud to chachma, which means that chachma represents the air. Like we said in that Mishnah, that the first ruach represents chachma. V'heimen yud hey vav keneged mem emesh v'mayim. The hey represents water. That's the water that comes out of the ruach. V'vav men yud hey vav keneged shin ma'alav mem shin. The vav goes against the shin, which is keneged esh mimayim, the fire that comes out of the water. V'da kim emesh shelamata mischalken alifona mehem l'soy zocha v'nekayva. And so from there forward, there's within each force there is a form and a vessel, and this represents a male and a female. Before that we had the spheres. The spheres represent a unity where they all come together, and the malchus is the nekeva. The malchus is the vessel that receives all the forms that are formed by the spheres. But once we come to the 22 letters, each letter has a male and a female, has a form and a vessel. They get split up between male and female. And so the forces that create the elements, over there we don't yet have a male and a female, but within the elements we start receiving that distinction, that the vessels are separate and distinct from the forms that they take on. And this is demonstrated in the body. In the body we see the male and the female because we have matter, which is the vessel, which forms an image, a representation of the spirit that's being revealed, and the spirit itself, which is the male, which is the form that comes in and animates the vessel, animates the matter. Third Mishnah, Shalosh Amas Emesh. Shalosh Amas Emesh is three mothers, Aleph Mem Shin, Ba'olam. They exist in space, they exist in time, and they exist in consciousness, in soul. So ba'olam, where do you find it in space? Aver ma'emesh, the elements that we've been speaking about, you will find them in space. Sometimes there's air in a certain area of space, sometimes there's water, and sometimes there's fire. If we look beyond that, we'll see that the heavens and the stars have a lot of fire, The air that surrounds the earth is a lot of air, and the earth is mostly surrounded by water. And so we see again in space the place for each of these elements. Shamayim nivrat tchila me'esh, the heavens have been created first from fire, even though they have the other elements mixed in, but their main component is fire. Ve'eretz nivres mimayim, the earth is covered in water. Ve'aver machria ben ha'esh ben hamayim, the air is what separates between them. Mishnah Dalet, the fourth Mishnah, Shalosh Ames Emesh B'Shana, where do you find it in time? Esh Mayim V'Ruach, fire, water, and air. Cham Nivra Me'esh, heat comes from fire. Summer represents fire, represents heat. Kar Mimayim, the cold comes from water. Winter represents water. The spring and the autumn that are between cold and hot, they represent the wind, the air. And so twice we have air. Once when the fire changes to water, and one when the water changes to fire. They don't change from one extreme to another immediately. They always go through the intermediary, which is air. Shalosh Ames Emesh Benefesh, where do you find the three elements in consciousness, in the soul? It says, Esh v'mayim v'ruach, fire, water, and air. Rosh nivra me'esh, the head is created from fire. The nervous system represents fire. The electrical pulse that communicates between the synapses represents fire. And so the head is fire. Speech. My words are like fire. Fire that give form to the air. There can be fiery words that fire up the spirit, or there can be fiery words that bring calm and peace to the spirit. It depends the type of fire that is being represented by the speech. The speech has many kinds of fire. Fire that burns, fire that gives sustenance, fire that depletes, fire that encourages. And so the head is created from fire. Beta nivra mimayim, the stomach is created from water. And that's the place of all the desires. That's the place where we are attracted to things and we want things. This is the main representation of sustenance. The main representation of food is represented by the stomach, which is water. Water represents sustenance. Igvu nivra miruach, the chest, the heart, and the lungs represent air. It's what decides between the stomach and the head. The head looks at life from one perspective. The stomach looks at life from another perspective. And the stomach includes the liver and the entire lower body. Everything is included in the stomach and in that perspective. Besides the reproductive organs, they have their own perspective. But the stomach is up against the brain, the head, and the one who's going to decide is the heart. And the one who's going to suffer the consequences is the heart. And so again we have this representation, this demonstration of how life manifests. Two opposites are created. And there's something that's going to choose. There's something that's going to decide how things are going to manifest. And so the name Shamayim comes from the word Eish and Mayim. It's a combination of fire and water. But what dominates the Shamayim is Eish, is the fire. It's the place where all the rules and the principles are being demonstrated. There's also compassion demonstrated by the Shamayim and the design of it. And therefore there's also water. But the main component of the Shamayim is the Eish, is the fire. And this happens in the child, that the main component that's going to be responsible for his soul is the desire, the fire that's there when he gets created. If there's a lack of fire, there's a lack of soul. What's going to be responsible for his body is the seed, is the water that gets created. If there isn't enough seed, if there isn't the right kind of seed, then the body is not going to be as stable, as developed. If there isn't enough desire, if there isn't enough heat, if there isn't enough passion, the soul is not going to be as developed. If there isn't enough love and connection and communication, the spirit is not going to be properly developed. And so in the creation is represented all the different parts. The wise would know how to create, because this is our ultimate creation. What ingredients need to be there? What needs to be fed in those moments in order for the child who comes forth to have the right balance, so that there's a proper relationship between the parts. And here in the fourth Mishnah about the times, he speaks about the nature of the seasons and how they create the fruits, how they create life on this planet, how they create the sustenance that keeps us alive. The more we have the right conditions, the more the fruits are going to come out in the perfect way. So essentially, what we are being taught in the seasons, in the cycles of the sun, in the cycles of the moon, and all the ingredients they put into creation, into the fruits, into the trees, into the plants, these are supposed to teach us the ingredients that we are supposed to give rise to during the creation of a human being. So if there's 12 months and each month is giving something to the earth in order to create the proper fruits, then there are 12 different intentions that need to be had when we are creating the child, to make sure that the child has all the different components and that there is proper motivation and recognition of all the different parts. This is related to the 12 zodiac signs. Each zodiac sign is going to appear in the child in some way. Did we align with that zodiac sign when we were creating the child? Or were we offending a zodiac sign, and therefore there's going to be something that's lacking in the child that they have to overcome? Some type of a challenge we are creating for them, because we are not aligned with all the parts that create production. This goes back to the basic blessings of the Torah. All the blessings relate around food and reproduction. He'll bless the fruits of your stomach, the fruits of your water element, the fruits of your animals, the fruits of your trees. This is where blessing applies. This is where sustenance of the different parts are involved. You'll eat your bread to satiation. It's not just the physical bread, it's all the different breads. Every organ needs its bread. Each piece of meat, each type of meat has a type of bread. And so it's to feed all our different parts. Lechem could mean also money. Lechem could mean also the right relationships. Like in the Torah by Potiphar, it says, Kim alechem asher oichel. Only the bread that he was eating is the only thing he kept away from Yosef. So the sages say this means his wife. That's his bread. That was the sustenance for that part of him. And the Gemara, it's called pas besaloi. He has bread in his basket. So it's a type of sustenance. All types of sustenance. If there's all types of sustenance, this is when there's balance. And so when we know the right intentions, we know the types of sustenance, then we can create human beings who can have prophecy. They will know the holy tongue. They will know the language of the organs. They will know the requirements of every part. All right. Thanks everyone. Good night.